I'd like to dedicate this story to my father, Irv Garfield, who tragically drowned when he was 58 on a boat fishing with his best friend, Jack Roberts. When my father died, I was 16, and among the things that I lost were the ability to listen to his great stories, all based on real events. My father was a traveling salesman and worked for a company called Edward Don that provided restaurant supply materials. And while we lived on the south side of Chicago, his territory was Kalamazoo, Michigan. So every other week, he'd get up at 4 a.m., drive to his territory, visit his customers, and in addition, he was always trying to get new customers so he could grow his base. One day he happened on the office of a Mr. Johnson who had a convention office to supply conventions, and he introduced himself to Mary Lou, Mr. Johnson, the owner's assistant, and explained to Mary Lou, you know, I'd like you to introduce me to Mr. Johnson. I'm sure I'd be a great salesperson and be able to help him with his supplies. And Mary Lou was nice enough, but she explained to my dad, Mr. Johnson's been dealing with the same supplier for years. He has no interest in changing suppliers, no interest in meeting you. I'm very sorry. My father, undeterred, decided that every other week when he'd make his rounds to his customers, he'd go and visit Mary Lou at Mr. Johnson's office. Months and months this went on. Eventually, Mary Lou even expected my father to come in. They got to know each other. But Mary Lou was always adamant, not letting my dad meet Mr. Johnson, playing the role of gatekeeper. One day, my father walked in the office, and upon seeing my father, Mary Lou said, "Oh, no, Mr. Johnson's definitely not going to see you today. No way. He's in a terrible mood." My father said, "Why? What's going on? What happened?" "Well, for his best and most important client, he needs 125 candlesticks by tomorrow. And his supplier said, no way. They're sold out, back-ordered for at least 2 weeks. Mr. Johnson's convinced he's going to lose his best client, and there's no way you're going to meet him today." My father said, "You call Mr. Johnson, and you tell him that I will have 125 candlestick holders to him tomorrow. I promise." And Mary Lou looked at my dad and said, "How are you going to do that? They're not available, not for at least another 2 weeks." My father said, "I promise you'll have them." "How are you going to deliver them?" she said. "Tell Mr. Johnson they're coming via carrier pigeon." She just looked at him and rolled her eyes. My father walked out the door, went down to the nearest payphone, for those of you that remember what that is, put in a call to his best friend, Jack Roberts, who was also his best client, who was the owner of the Pantlin Hotel that was right down the road from Mr. Johnson's office. And he said, "Jack, can I have 125 of those candlestick holders that you use? Can I have them for tomorrow? Can you pull them out of the warehouse for me?" Jack said, "Fine, no problem. Done." "One more thing," my father said. "When the delivery guy brings them, can you pack them in paper bags with 2 holes at the top?" "Done," Jack said. Taken care of. Needless to say, my father got Mr. Johnson as a new client, and Mr. Johnson used my father as his supplier going forward for the rest of the account. We always thought my father must have really embellished that story. It was so crazy. And then a few years ago, when my mom passed away, we were going through papers, and it came upon a telegram. And the telegram said, "Irv, the candlestick holders arrived via carrier pigeon just as you promised. Thank you, Mr. Johnson."
All right, give it up for Ellen.